I never thought I'd be the guy posting here, but life has a way of throwing you into situations you never imagined. My name's Alexander, 64 years old, and I've been married to Lila for 30 years. 3 decades. That's a lifetime. We built everything together, our home, our memories, our routines. She was my best friend, the person I laughed with, cried with, and counted on. I thought we were solid. But I guess no marriage is bulletproof. I should probably give some background. A few years ago I had a heart scare. Doctors called it a mild cardiac event, but let's not sugarcoat it. It was a heart attack. Nothing too major, but enough to change my life. Medications, lifestyle changes, and well, let's just say certain husbandly duties became harder to perform. Lila was supportive at first. She told me she didn't care, that love was more than just physical intimacy, that we'd figure things out together. I believed her. Now I wonder if I was just hearing what I wanted to hear. The cracks must have started forming long before I noticed. Lila had always been ambitious, always cared about how others saw her. She worked in marketing, a high-energy social job that kept her surrounded by younger, good-looking professionals. I never felt insecure about it though. We were in this together. At least, I thought we were. Then came Ethan Bennett. I knew of him before I really knew him. He was in his early 40s, good shape, full of that arrogant energy younger guys have when they still think they're invincible. He worked under Lila, literally and, as I later found out, figuratively. She mentioned him in passing over dinner, always in a way that felt casual. Ethan had a great idea today, or Ethan is really pushing for this new campaign. Looking back, it was the way she said his name. Like she was trying not to sound too interested. I ignored it. I ignored a lot of things, honestly. The way she started dressing just a little sharper, her makeup a little bolder. The way she spent more time at work events, coming home late, smelling like expensive cocktails and someone else's cologne. The way her phone never left her side, the screen tilted away when I walked by. I chalked it up to stress. To midlife restlessness. To anything but what it really was. And then came the work conference. Lila had invited me along, saying it would be a good way to get out of the house and enjoy some time together. I thought it was sweet. I thought maybe she was trying to reconnect. It didn't cross my mind that she might have wanted me there just to throw me off the scent. The first night went fine. Dinners, handshakes, small talk. Lila was in her element, laughing with her colleagues, holding my hand just enough to keep up appearances. But something felt off. A little too forced. Then came the second night. That was the night everything changed. That was the night I found out my wife wasn't just my wife anymore. And it all started with a locked door. I wasn't even looking for trouble. I wasn't snooping or trying to catch her in a lie. I just wanted to find my wife. The second night of the conference, there was some kind of private party happening on one of the upper floors. It wasn't on the schedule. One of those after-hours gatherings where the real networking happens. Lila had mentioned she might go, depending on how she felt. I had gone back to our hotel room earlier, tired from all the polite conversations and industry talk. But after an hour of flipping through TV channels, something gnawed at me. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe deep down, I already knew. I sent her a text. "Are you coming back soon?" No response. I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. I don't know what pushed me to go looking for her, but I did. I threw on my jacket, took the elevator up, and found the private party room. The music thumped through the walls, laughter spilling into the hallway. A security guy stood by the door, checking names against a list. I could have turned around. I could have convinced myself she was just mingling, drinking with her coworkers, nothing unusual. But something in my gut told me otherwise. I walked up to the guy and said, "I'm looking for my wife, Lila Bennett." He gave me a once-over, probably noting the wedding ring and my age compared to the crowd inside. He hesitated, then shrugged. "Go ahead, sir." The moment I stepped in, I felt out of place. The room was dimly lit, filled with younger professionals, half-drunk and draped over each other. Music pulsed through the air, and the scent of expensive perfume mixed with the bitterness of alcohol. I scanned the crowd, looking for her. And then I saw it. A hallway, off to the side, leading to a set of private rooms. My stomach twisted. I walked toward it, passing groups of people too caught up in their own conversations to notice me. Most of the doors were open, just groups of people chatting, some making out, others laughing over drinks. But one door, at the very end, was closed. I reached for the handle. Locked. That's when I heard it. A muffled giggle. A low voice. The kind of laugh my wife used to have when she was teasing me. My fingers tightened around the handle. My heart pounded, not from exertion, but from something worse. I knocked. Hard. The giggling stopped. Silence. Then, whispers. Scrambling. The sound of a belt being buckled. I felt like the floor had just disappeared beneath me. I didn't wait for them to open the door. I pulled out my phone, shaking, and snapped a picture of the room number. Then I stepped back, positioned my phone under the crack at the bottom of the door, and took another photo. 2 sets of feet. One in heels. One in men's dress shoes. I turned and walked away before I could do something I'd regret. I don't even remember how I got back to our hotel room. 1 second, I was standing outside that locked door, listening to the sound of my wife scrambling inside with another man. The next, I was sitting on the edge of our hotel bed, staring at my phone, the photos burning into my retinas. 2 sets of feet. One in heels. One in men's dress shoes. It didn't take a genius to figure out who they belonged to. Ethan Bennett. The name rang in my head like a damn alarm. I thought about barging in, catching them in the act, throwing Ethan through the nearest window. But what would that do? Give them a scare? Give me a few moments of satisfaction? It wouldn't change what she had done. So I sat there, fuming. Minutes passed. Maybe an hour. Then, click. The door to our room opened. Lila walked in, all dolled up, her lipstick a little too smudged, her hair a little too messy. She froze when she saw me sitting there, phone in hand. "Alex," she said, voice tight, like she wasn't sure what mood I was in. "You're still up?" I didn't answer right away. I just lifted my phone, turned the screen toward her, and showed her the picture of the feet under the door. Her face drained of color. "What is this?" I asked, my voice calm. Too calm. Lila swallowed hard. Where did you get that?" "From outside the door," I said. "The locked door. The one you were behind." Silence. I watched as a dozen different expressions flashed across her face. Shock, fear, guilt. But no denial. Not right away, at least. "I was just talking," she said finally. "Alex, I swear, it's not what you think." I let out a bitter laugh. "Not what I think. Lila, your shoes are right there." His shoes are right there. The door was locked. "You didn't hear me knock." She opened her mouth, then closed it. That was all the confirmation I needed. I stood up slowly, slipping my phone into my pocket. "Who was it?" I asked, even though I already knew. Her hands twisted together. "Alex, please, can we?" "Who was it?" Her eyes darted away. That was another answer. "Ethan," I said flatly. Lila squeezed her eyes shut. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I snapped. "Explain it to me, because from where I was standing, it looked like my wife of 30 years, was screwing her little work buddy in a locked room at a work event." Her lip quivered. "Alex, I never meant." "You never meant for what?" I stepped closer, my voice low, dangerous. "Never meant to get caught? Never meant to make me look like a fool in front of your coworkers?" That hit something, because her whole posture collapsed. She sat down on the bed, burying her face in her hands. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. I shook my head. "Then how was it supposed to be, Lila?" She sniffed, looking up at me with tears in her eyes. "It was just physical. That's all it was. It didn't mean anything." That sentence hit me harder than if she'd slapped me across the face. Didn't mean anything? 30 years together. 30 years of building a life. And she threw it all away for something that didn't mean anything? I felt something inside me snap. "You disgust me," I said, my voice cold. Lila let out a choked sob. "Alex, please, I still love you." I turned away, grabbing my coat. I needed air before I did something I regretted. I stopped at the door, glancing back at her one last time. "You humiliated me, Lila. In front of everyone." Then I walked out. I didn't go far. Just down to the hotel bar. I needed something strong, something to stop the shaking in my hands. The bartender gave me a nod as I slid onto a stool. What'll it be? Whiskey. Neat. He poured, and I downed it in one go. It burned all the way down, but it didn't do a damn thing to numb the ache in my chest. Lila. My Lila. The woman who used to kiss my forehead in the mornings, who used to rest her head on my shoulder during movies, who used to trace lazy circles on my palm when we held hands, she was gone. Replaced by someone who had no problem sneaking off to a locked room with another man. I gripped my glass so tight I thought it might shatter. And the worst part? Everyone probably knew. That was the real dagger in my back. The humiliation. This wasn't just some secret affair happening behind closed doors. This was happening at work. Right under my nose. If I had found out, how many others already knew? Were people laughing at me behind my back? Whispering when I walked into a room. I ordered another drink. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the counter, before I felt a presence beside me. Lila. I didn't even look at her. Alex, she said softly. Can we please talk? I think we've said enough. She sighed, folding her hands in front of her. I know you're furious, and I deserve that. But please, can we go somewhere private? I let out a dry chuckle. What, another locked room? She flinched. Don't do that. I turned to face her, and for the first time, I really looked at her. She was wrecked. Smudged makeup, puffy eyes, lips trembling like she was barely keeping it together. But I didn't care. She deserved to feel like this. You want to talk? I asked, setting my glass down. Fine. Let's talk. But we're doing it publicly, the same way you humiliated me. Sit down. Her mouth parted like she wanted to argue, but then she nodded and slid onto the stool next to me. A waiter walked over. Sir, would you like to see a dinner menu? I looked at Lila. Are you hungry? She hesitated, then nodded again. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then let's eat. We sat in silence as we browsed the menu. It was the most surreal thing, ordering dinner with the woman who had just betrayed me, like we were any normal couple. Once we ordered, I leaned forward, clasping my hands together. So tell me, Lila. How long? She inhaled sharply. A few months. I nodded slowly. How did it start? She bit her lip. I was frustrated. I felt neglected. I let out a cold laugh. Neglected. She looked down at her lap. Not emotionally, but physically. You know things haven't been the same since your heart issues, and I held up a hand. So because I couldn't perform the way I used to, you decided to find someone who could? It wasn't like that. It wasn't. I tilted my head. Explain it to me then. Because from where I'm sitting, that's exactly what it looks like. Her breathing was shaky. I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. I let out another humorless chuckle. Right. You tripped and fell into a locked room with Ethan. Stop. She wiped at her eyes. You're making this sound cheap. It is cheap, Lila. I clenched my jaw. You threw away 30 years over nothing. She sucked in a breath. I didn't throw it away. I still love you. I shook my head. No, Lila. You don't. She reached across the table, trying to grab my hand, but I pulled back. Alex, she pleaded. It was just physical. It didn't mean anything. You mean everything to me. I stared at her, my expression blank. Do you even hear yourself? You mean everything to me, but I still let another man touch me. She winced. I was selfish. I was stupid. But I don't want to lose you. The waiter returned with our food, setting the plates in front of us. Neither of us touched them. You should have thought about that before, I muttered. Lila's eyes brimmed with tears again. Are you going to leave me? I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. I wanted to. Every part of me was screaming at me to walk away. But 30 years is a long time. There were financial ties. Health insurance. Retirement plans. Our home. The life we built together. It wasn't as simple as packing a bag and leaving. She saw the hesitation on my face and latched onto it. We can fix this, she whispered. We can go to therapy. We can work through it. Please, Alex. Don't throw everything away. The irony. She was begging me not to throw it away. I picked up my fork, stabbing at my food without taking a bite. I don't know yet, I admitted. Lila swallowed, nodding quickly. That's okay. Just, please, let's figure this out together. I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know if there was anything left to figure out. I barely tasted my food. Every bite felt like sawdust, sitting heavy in my stomach. Lila kept stealing glances at me, her fork pushing food around her plate, but she hardly ate either. We must have looked normal to the rest of the restaurant, just another older couple having dinner, caught in a quiet conversation. No one could see the wreckage sitting between us, the invisible wall of betrayal and disgust. Finally, I set my fork down and wiped my mouth with a napkin. Tell me, I said, voice low. Did anyone else know? Lila blinked. What? Your co-workers. Our friends. Did they know? She hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Of course they did. It wasn't, she sighed, rubbing her temples. A few people suspected. But I never told anyone. I clenched my jaw. So they were just watching? Letting me walk into work events with you, smiling at me, knowing the whole time that I was the idiot husband getting played. Lila looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. My voice was tight, controlled. They knew, and no one had the decency to tell me. She reached for my hand again, and this time I let her, just to see how it felt. It felt wrong. I know you're angry, she whispered. I hate myself for what I did. But, Alex, I love you. I want to fix this. I'll quit my job if that's what it takes. I'll do anything. I stared at her hand in mine, at the wedding ring still wrapped around her finger. The same ring I had put there 30 years ago, believing we were forever. That version of us was dead. I pulled my hand away. I can't do this, Lila. Her breath hitched. Alex, please. I stood up, dropped my napkin onto the table, reached into my pocket, pulled out some cash, and tossed it next to my untouched plate. I need time, I muttered. Don't call me. Then I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Lila sitting there, staring after me, her world falling apart just like she had shattered mine. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be near her anymore. I walked out of the restaurant and into the night air, my head pounding, my chest tight. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from Lila, away from the humiliation, away from the unbearable weight pressing down on me. The city buzzed around me, people laughing, walking in and out of bars, living their lives like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, my entire world had just imploded. I wandered for what felt like hours, my thoughts spiraling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that locked door. Heard the muffled laughter. Imagined Ethan's hands on her body. It made me sick. I wanted to scream, punch something, anything to make the rage inside me stop boiling over. But I just kept walking. Eventually, I found myself back at the hotel, standing in the dimly lit hallway outside our room. I wasn't ready to face her again. I had told her not to call me, but I knew she'd be inside waiting. I unlocked the door and stepped in, half expecting to see her curled up in bed, pretending to be asleep. But she wasn't. She was sitting on the floor, back against the bed, her face buried in her hands. When she heard me, she looked up, her eyes swollen from crying. Alex, she whispered. I didn't say anything. Just stared at her, waiting for the anger to dull, for some kind of clarity to hit me. It never did. She stood slowly, wiping at her face, but she looked exhausted, like she had aged 10 years in the past few hours. I thought you weren't coming back. I almost didn't. My voice was flat, lifeless. She swallowed. I meant what I said. I'll do anything, Alex. I'll quit my job. I'll cut off all contact with him. Just tell me what to do. I let out a slow breath, rubbing a hand down my face. I don't think you get it, Lila. It's not just about quitting your job. It's about the fact that I don't know who you are anymore. She took a shaky step forward. I'm still me. The same woman you married. No, I said coldly. The woman I married wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have lied to my face for months. She wouldn't have humiliated me in front of people we know. Lila flinched, like my words physically hurt her. I was stupid. I was selfish. But I never stopped loving you. I laughed bitterly. Love? Love isn't sneaking around in hotel rooms with another man. Love isn't making me look like an idiot while everyone around us knew. That's not love, Lila. That's betrayal. Her hands trembled as she reached for me, but I stepped back. I could see it in her eyes, that desperate hope that I'd soften, that I'd take her in my arms and tell her we could work through this. But I couldn't. I just need time, I said finally. To think. She nodded quickly, as if she was afraid to push me too far. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. However long it takes. I wanted to believe that time would change something, that I could eventually forgive her, but deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't something you just got over. Some betrayals changed everything. Some things, once broken, couldn't be put back together. I packed a bag that night. Lila didn't try to stop me. She just stood there, arms wrapped around herself, watching as I threw clothes into my suitcase. When I reached for my wedding ring, I hesitated. I turned it over in my fingers, remembering the day I put it on, the way she had smiled at me, the way I had thought we were forever. Then, without a word, I set it down on the nightstand and walked out the door. She didn't follow me. And for the first time in 30 years, I felt completely, utterly alone. I checked into another hotel that night, somewhere far enough from the conference but still close enough that I wasn't stranded. The moment I stepped into the room, I locked the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and just stared. At nothing. At everything. At the walls, the carpet, my suitcase. At the life I suddenly didn't recognize. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Lila. Please let me know you're safe. I turned the screen off and lay back on the bed, arms stretched over my eyes. I was safe. But my marriage? My dignity? My trust? That was dead in the water. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw them. Ethan and Lila, behind that locked door. I imagined his hands on her body, the way she must have smiled at him, the way she had once smiled at me. I imagined the way he must have laughed at me afterward, knowing he had taken something that was mine. The betrayal ran deeper than just her infidelity. Ethan was younger, more energetic, free from the health struggles that had slowed me down over the years. He had everything I used to have, and he used it to take my wife. By morning, my mind was made up. I wasn't going back. I didn't text her. Didn't call. I checked out of the hotel, got on a plane, and went home. Let her deal with the aftermath of her choices. Days passed. Then a week. Lila called every day. Sometimes she left voicemails, sometimes just texts, desperate, pleading, apologizing. She swore Ethan meant nothing, that it was just physical, that she had been lonely, that she hadn't meant to hurt me. Like that made it better. I didn't respond. Instead, I met with a divorce lawyer. 30 years of marriage meant things wouldn't be simple. There were assets, accounts, our home. Health insurance, which I still needed. Cutting ties completely wasn't as easy as just packing a bag and leaving. But then, something insane happened. I won the lottery. Not a couple $100. Not some small prize. A jackpot. Enough money to change my life overnight. And just like that, every excuse I had to stay, financial security, stability, the fear of starting over, vanished. The first thing I did? Called my lawyer and told him I wanted the divorce finalized as soon as possible. Lila wasn't getting out of this without her fair share. I wasn't about to let her paint me as the vengeful husband who left her with nothing. So we split everything, 50-50. I had more than enough now. When I finally told her, she broke down completely. She begged me to reconsider. She swore she had changed, that she had made the biggest mistake of her life, that we could fix this. But I was already gone. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt something I hadn't in weeks, relief. Like I had been carrying a weight for years and suddenly, finally, it was lifted. Lila, on the other hand, fell apart. She lost her job within months. Apparently, workplace affairs don't go over well when your colleagues know about it. Ethan? He didn't stick around. Once he realized she was a divorced, unemployed, broken woman, he bailed, probably moving on to his next conquest. She reached out to me again, not to beg this time, but to talk. To apologize again. She told me she had nothing left, that she had lost everything. And I did something even I didn't expect. I helped her. Not financially, she still had her half of the money. But I helped her sue her former employer for wrongful termination. And we won. $1 million settlement. For a while, we stayed in touch. She wanted to be friends. Maybe she hoped for more, but I knew better. I wasn't the same man she had betrayed. I was free now, and I wasn't going back. She still asked if I could ever forgive her. If I could ever love her again. And my answer never changed. No. She made her choice. And now, I was making mine. I was done looking back. My future, my freedom, it was finally mine. After the settlement, Lila tried to rebuild her life, but it was clear she was struggling. She had the money, but money doesn't buy back respect. It doesn't erase the fact that she had torched her reputation. People at her old job wanted nothing to do with her. Friends we once shared kept their distance. She was alone, and for the first time, she couldn't charm or manipulate her way out of it. She reached out again, more frequently now. Not begging, not apologizing, just talking. Little things. Asking how I was, if I had seen a movie she knew I'd like, if I still went to the coffee shop we used to visit on Sundays. It was clear she wanted to wedge herself back into my life, little by little, testing if I'd soften over time. I didn't. But I didn't shut her out completely either. I don't know why. Maybe part of me still felt pity for her. Maybe I just wanted to see how far she'd sink. Maybe, deep down, I wanted her to see me moving on. To make sure she knew that I was fine while she was drowning. And I was fine. Better than fine. Winning the lottery was like getting handed a second chance at life. Suddenly, all the things I had put off, traveling, hobbies, even dating, were possible again. For the first time in years, I wasn't just existing. I was living. Lila hated that. She never said it outright, but I could hear it in her voice every time she asked what I was up to. She couldn't stand that I was out enjoying myself while she was stuck in the ruins of the life she destroyed. Then came the moment I should have seen coming. She asked me to meet her for dinner. Just to catch up. No expectations, no pressure. I agreed. Not because I wanted to reconcile, but because I wanted to see, to look her in the eye and know, once and for all, that I had made the right decision. The moment I walked into the restaurant, I knew what was coming. She had dressed up, just like she used to for date nights. Hair styled, makeup done, wearing the perfume I had always loved on her. It was pathetic. She smiled, trying to act casual, but I could see the hope in her eyes. "Alex," she breathed. "It's really good to see you." I sat down, keeping my expression neutral. "Yeah, you too." We made small talk at first. She asked about my travels, my new house, how I had been spending my time. I answered, keeping things short. Then she leaned forward, her voice softer. "Do you ever miss me?" I met her gaze. "I miss who I thought you were." She swallowed hard, nodding like she had expected that answer, but the way her hands clenched together told me it still hurt. "I know I don't deserve a second chance," she murmured. "But if I asked for one, would you even consider it?" I let the silence stretch between us, making sure she felt it. Then I shook my head. "No." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Alex, I held up a hand. "Lila, I forgave you a long time ago. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I don't hate you anymore, but I don't love you either. And I never will again." She exhaled sharply, looking away. "I don't know how to move on from this." I gave her a sad smile. "That's not my problem." And with that, I stood up, dropped some cash on the table, and walked out. This time, she didn't follow me. And I never looked back. Lila didn't contact me again after that dinner. I think deep down she finally understood, I was done. Whatever we had built over 30 years was gone, and no amount of regret or pleading would bring it back. I had closed that chapter of my life, and she was left standing alone in the ashes. And I was thriving. With my newfound wealth, I did everything I had put off for years. I traveled, Paris, Tokyo, Rome, places I had once only seen in magazines. I bought a house overlooking the ocean, a place just for me, where every sunrise reminded me that I had survived the worst and come out stronger. But the biggest change? I lived without guilt. For years, I had worried about my health, about money, about being a good husband. I had sacrificed, compromised, settled. But now, I didn't have to anymore. I could enjoy life on my terms. Dating was a strange experience at first. After 30 years with the same woman, I wasn't sure how to start over. But I did. Casual flings at first, then something more serious. Nothing permanent yet. I wasn't looking for another wife. But I was living, and that was enough. One day, I heard through an old mutual friend that Lila had moved away. She sold the house we had shared and left the city. No one really knew where she went, and to be honest, I didn't care. She was a ghost from my past, someone I once knew but no longer recognized. And that's how it stayed. Sometimes, I think back to that night at the hotel. To the locked door. To the moment I realized my marriage was over. And instead of anger or sadness, I feel something else entirely. Gratitude. Because her betrayal? It set me free. It had been almost a year since the divorce was finalized when I ran into someone from our old life. I was at a cafe near the beach, enjoying my coffee, when I heard a voice say my name. Alex. I looked up, and there she was, Maggie, one of Lila's former co-workers. She hesitated for a moment, like she wasn't sure if she should approach, but I gave her a small nod. She sat down across from me, setting her drink on the table. Wow. It's been a while. I just nodded, waiting. I knew what was coming. She tilted her head. You look good. I feel good. She smiled, but there was something else in her expression, something almost hesitant. I don't know if you want to hear about Lila. I shrugged. Doesn't matter to me. Maggie studied me for a second, then sighed. She's not doing well. I didn't respond. She tried to come back, Maggie continued. After everything. Thought maybe people would forgive her, but, well, you know how things are. I did. People don't forget that easily, especially in a professional setting where reputations matter. Lila had built her career on being respected, admired. Once the affair came out, that image shattered. She left the city, Maggie went on. Moved somewhere quieter. I think she thought a fresh start would help. I took a slow sip of my coffee. And did it. Maggie hesitated. I don't think so. She's been lost. She doesn't have many friends anymore. Ethan left her. She tried dating, but it didn't work out. And well, she talks about you. A lot. I let out a quiet sigh, setting my cup down. Maggie, what are you trying to say? She bit her lip, then finally said it. She regrets it, Alex. Every single day. I wasn't surprised. Regret was all she had left. For a long time, I didn't say anything. I just stared out at the ocean, the waves rolling in and out, constant and unaffected by the messes people made of their lives. Then I turned back to Maggie. You know what's funny? What? I smiled slightly. If Lila had come to me before all of this, before she cheated, before she lied, before she humiliated me, if she had just talked to me, told me how she felt, how she was struggling, I would have done anything for her. I would have worked through it. But she didn't. She made her choice. And now she has to live with it. Maggie nodded slowly. I get it. I glanced at my watch. It was good seeing you, Maggie. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but in the end, she just gave me a small smile. You too, Alex. I left the cafe feeling lighter, like I had finally put to rest the last remaining ghosts of that life. Lila's story was over for me. She had written her own ending, and now she had to live in it. And I had never been more free. Months passed, and Lila became nothing more than a distant thought, like an old book I had finished reading and put away. I didn't hate her anymore, but I didn't miss her either. She was just someone I used to know. Life, on the other hand, kept moving forward. I traveled more, took up new hobbies, even started dating again. At first, it felt strange, sitting across from a woman who wasn't Lila, making small talk, learning about someone new after 30 years with the same person. But as time went on, I started enjoying it. I was meeting people who hadn't known me as part of a couple, who weren't looking at me with pity or whispering behind my back about how my wife had left me for some younger man. I was just Alex. And that felt good. Then one evening, out of nowhere, I got a message from an unknown number. Hey, Alex. It's Lila. I stared at the screen for a long time. She had been radio silent for months. The last time we had spoken was at that dinner, when she had asked if I could ever love her again, and I had told her no. I thought that had been the final nail in the coffin, but here she was, reaching out again. I debated ignoring it, blocking the number. But curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want, Lila?" A few minutes passed. Then, I don't know. I guess I wanted to see how you were doing." I shook my head. After everything, this was her excuse? "I'm doing fine." I left it at that, expecting the conversation to end. But she wasn't done. "I saw a picture of you the other day. One of our old friends posted it. You were in Italy." I had been. A spontaneous trip, just because I could. And apparently, she had been keeping tabs on me. "Yeah. Spent a few weeks there." "That's amazing, Alex. You always wanted to go." I frowned at the familiarity in her words. Like she still had the right to talk to me this way. I did. A pause. Then another message. "Do you ever think about me?" I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. There it was. The real reason she had reached out. I could have lied. Could have said no, that she was nothing to me now. But that wasn't entirely true. Sometimes. But not in the way you're hoping. Her response came quickly. "I know I ruined everything. I miss you." I stared at the message, feeling nothing but exhaustion. She missed me. Not Ethan. Not whatever thrill she had gotten from sneaking around behind my back. Me. The man she had thrown away like he was disposable. I could have been cruel. I could have ignored her. But instead, I typed back one final message. "Lila, I forgave you. But that doesn't mean I want you back in my life. We had our time, and it's over. You need to let go." She didn't reply. I turned off my phone, set it down, and looked out at the ocean stretching in front of my house. The sky was fading into deep oranges and purples, the last light of the day sinking beyond the horizon. And for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Weeks passed, and Lila never responded to my last message. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe she didn't have the strength to try again. Either way, I didn't care. That door had been closed, locked, and sealed shut. I had no intention of opening it ever again. I kept living my life, and I have to say, winning the lottery had been the best accidental blessing. Not because of the money itself, but because of the freedom it gave me. I didn't have to worry about expenses, didn't have to stress about financial security, and most importantly, I didn't have to feel trapped in a relationship because of practical reasons. If I had still been dependent on Lila's job for health insurance, if I had been worried about our shared mortgage or assets, maybe I would have been tempted to stay. Maybe I would have let her guilt trip me into reconciliation. But none of that mattered anymore. I was free. And I was finally enjoying that freedom. I started traveling again. Spent a month in Greece, then another in Spain. I took cooking classes in France, went scuba diving in Australia, and even tried skydiving once in New Zealand, though I can't say I'd ever do that again. But I wasn't just ticking off bucket list items. I was living, truly living, in a way I hadn't for years. And then one night, something happened that reminded me just how far I had come. I was at a rooftop bar in Barcelona, sipping on a glass of whiskey, enjoying the cool night air, when I noticed a woman sitting at a nearby table. She was stunning, effortlessly beautiful in a way that wasn't overly polished, just natural, confident. She caught me looking, and instead of turning away, she smiled. That simple gesture stirred something in me. I had dated since the divorce, but nothing serious. It had always felt forced. Like I was just going through the motions, trying to convince myself I was over the past. But this felt different. I hesitated for a moment before standing up, walking over to her table. "Mind if I join you?" She looked up, eyes amused. "Depends. Are you interesting?" I chuckled. "I guess you'll have to find out." She gestured to the chair across from her, and just like that, we started talking. Her name was Isabella, and she was a travel writer. She had been to over 50 countries, spoke 4 languages, and had this infectious energy that made it impossible not to be drawn in. We talked for hours, about places we'd been, things we wanted to do, and even the ridiculousness of reality TV. And for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Lila. I wasn't comparing. I wasn't measuring this new experience against my past. I was just there in the moment, enjoying the company of a beautiful woman who had no idea who I used to be. The night stretched on, the conversation flowing easily, and eventually she leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a playful whisper. "So, Alex, tell me, are you going to kiss me, or are we just going to sit here pretending we don't want to?" I laughed, shaking my head. "You don't waste time, do you?" She grinned. "Life's too short." And she was right. So I kissed her. And in that moment, I realized something important. Lila had taken years from me. She had broken my trust, shattered my sense of security, and made me question my worth. But she hadn't ruined me. She hadn't taken away my ability to love, to connect, to move forward. She had tried to drag me down into the wreckage of her mistakes, but I had walked away. And now? Now, I was living a life she could only dream of. A life that was truly, completely mine. I spent the next few months traveling with Isabella. It started off as something casual, two people enjoying each other's company, no expectations, no baggage. But as time went on, it became more. We explored new cities together, tried foods neither of us could pronounce, stayed up late drinking wine on balconies overlooking the sea. She made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years. She challenged me, pushed me out of my comfort zone, made me feel like I was living instead of just existing. And the best part? She had no idea about my past. No idea that I had been cheated on, humiliated, tossed aside like an afterthought. With her, I wasn't Alex, the betrayed husband. I was just Alex. And that felt good. But the past has a way of creeping back in when you least expect it. One afternoon, while we were in Italy, I got a message from an old friend. Someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time. "Hey Alex, I thought you might want to know. Lila's trying to find you." I stared at my phone, feeling a familiar tightness in my chest. I had gone months without thinking about her, without hearing her name. And now, out of nowhere, she was looking for me? I didn't respond. Didn't ask why. I had no interest in reopening that door. But then, 2 days later, another message came. She asked me if you were seeing anyone. I didn't tell her, but she seems desperate. Desperate. I shouldn't have cared. I didn't care. But something about it made me uneasy. I didn't respond to that message either. Instead, I turned off my phone and went out to meet Isabella for dinner. She greeted me with a bright smile, linking her arm through mine as we walked toward a little restaurant tucked away in one of the side streets of Rome. I didn't tell her about the messages. I didn't tell her about Lila. Because she didn't matter anymore. Or at least, that's what I told myself. But a week later, Lila found me. I was in Madrid, sitting in a cafe with Isabella, when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in almost a year. "Alex." My stomach dropped. I turned, and there she was. Lila. She looked different. Older. Like life had worn her down in a way that no amount of makeup could fix. She wasn't the confident, put-together woman I had once known. She looked lost. She swallowed hard. "Can we talk?" Isabella looked between us, then at me. "Who is this?" Lila's eyes flickered to her, and I saw it, the realization. The understanding that I had moved on. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I reached for Isabella's hand. "No, Lila. We have nothing to talk about." Lila opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but then she saw the way Isabella leaned into me, the way my fingers intertwined with hers so naturally, so effortlessly. And she knew. She had lost me. For good. She let out a shaky breath, nodded once, and then just like that, she walked away. I watched her disappear into the crowd, and for the first time since all of this started, I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. No resentment. Just peace. I turned back to Isabella, who was still watching me carefully. "An ex?" she asked. I smiled, squeezing her hand. "A mistake." Then I picked up my coffee, took a sip, and never looked back. Lila never reached out again. That moment in Madrid was enough. She finally knew I had moved on. Life kept going. No regrets, no resentment. Just freedom. One evening, watching the sunset, Isabella smiled at me. "You seem lighter." I squeezed her hand. I finally let go.